And here we are again. Welcome back to another episode of the Opinionated Thoughtbotter. I'm Svenja Schäfer, your host. I'm a development team lead and developer at Thoughtbot. And today we have a special edition because, as you can see, I have two guests. Usually in the Opinionated Thoughtbotter, I talk about one opinion with one of my fellow colleagues. Today we make it a little bit more not dramatic, but more exciting. With me today, we have Danny and Andrew. And Danny, do you want to start? Say a little bit about who you are and then pass it over to Andrew?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Danny. I'm a product manager and team lead at thoughtbot. I've been at thoughtbot about 3 years and just a lover of all product things. I'll get into it a little bit more. I have a little bit of sarcasm behind that, but that's just me. But I'll pass it over to Andrew.
Hey, I'm Andrew, principal product designer here at thoughtbot. And Danny and I have worked together on a couple projects now. So I'm very curious to get into our opinions as we've probably have maybe slightly different opinions, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Speaking about opinions, so neither Danny nor Andrew knows the opinion of the others. So it's going to be really exciting. Let's jump right into it. Andrew, what is your opinion in one sentence?
Yeah, so my opinion, and we're talking about how PMs and designers should handle the handoff process, right? So my opinion is PMs should hand off blank user stories and let designers fill in the details.
Ooh, interesting.
Yes.
That is interesting.
Blank is a pretty interesting term. Okay, that's okay.
Of course, I'm going to caveat that and we'll walk through, expanding on it. But uh,
That's the episode, folks. Let's just cut it right
just
there.
cut right there. Yeah.
Danny, Danny, over to you.
But I want to hear
What
Danny's
is your
now. So
opinion?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh gosh, mine's so much more tame now. I was trying to make it so much more like, yeah, I felt like I was gonna get like absolutely wrecked in the comments if I wrote something too spicy, but my opinion, similar topic, was product managers should keep a healthy amount of ambiguity in product requirements for designers. So I actually wrote kind of the same thing. I thought you were gonna go the other way a little bit, mostly because of our last project, but
mm.
that's interesting. It's interesting that we landed on the same thing.
You said already last project. I have a question. How often do you work together?
Annoyingly, we've been on the same project like almost
Annoyingly.
back to back. Yeah.
Ouch. Yeah, it's been like what, 2 or 3 projects now?
Yeah,
They
pretty
were longer
much.
projects, so we um, spent a lot of time together. And it's
Yeah.
interesting how our approaches might have been different on different types of clients. Um, and obviously, like, these are very subjective opinions that are very contextual to the project that you're working on, the people that you're working with, the level of experience of everyone on the team, and like the closeness of the relationship between the designer and the PM. I think there's like a healthy amount of collaboration going on there too.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because your opinion is quite similar, right? So I was just like, yeah, why yours, Andrew, goes a little bit one step further, so to say, because you say, well, blank user stories, right? Danny, can you think of any details you would like to see in a user story?
I mean, blank is interesting. I'm sure you didn't mean that literally, because then it's just like, what? Well, there's no handoff. But I mean, I'm happy to do that. That's less work for me. Um, but I think at the very least, so my stance is usually, or the reason why I think I took my stance was like I've seen a lot of times product managers will over prescribe things in user stories, and so they'll write the most core details, right? Like, so it's like, what problem are we solving? What is the core feature? Like, what is the business case? All these different things. And it depends on the organization. Some organizations work off of like epics and user stories. Some organizations require CRDs, like product requirement docs, and wiki pages and all these different things. But I've often seen product managers like spend so much time, like weeks, days, weeks, like writing requirements, and they'll kind of like over prescribe it to the point where it almost kind of feels like you're saying, I want a user to be able to press a green button and then go to the next page, right? Like to that extent. And my opinion is usually like you have like your opinion doesn't matter as a product manager that much, like on how it should happen. The thing that matters for you is like what is the actual problem that we're solving for, and like why does it matter? That's it. That's all that really matters. And the how things should be built or how things should be designed is entirely up to designers and developers. um, like you can have an opinion, but like I don't think product managers opinions really matter that much. And that's like such a I have such a rant that I can go on about that, but like it's kind of, yeah, I think PMs sometimes get into like their own egos about like feeling like they're the CEOs of their own products, and it's like you're not the CEO unless you own the company. You're not the CEO, so like it's okay.
Andrew, did Danny ever give your user stories a full of requirements? Why you now only want to have blank?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem here. No, no, I think Danny approached it really well, and tended to err on the side of ambiguity. It's interesting because I literally have written out in my little notes about this that I had to boil it down to a specific sentence, like Sen just said. So my expanded version is that PM should own the what and the why of the user story, and designers should own the how. And so that's like writing requirements, filling out the details. A lot of times I feel like designers don't want to jump in and do that kind of work. They're like writing all of that out. They'd rather stay in
Yeah,
Figma in their design tool, kind of iterating there. But I think the more that designers can get into the user stories and be adding details and helping shape that before it gets handed off to development, I think is very helpful. And obviously that involves a lot of back and forth between the PM and the designer. But I think if the designer owns how are we going to solve this problem that's been very detailed and explained by the PM, that's a great place for a designer to be. It helps give like constraints to the designer's workflow, because I know we can go off in la la land and start exploring all this stuff that isn't applicable. We need that scoping, that context to keep us grounded in our actual design work to explore solutions.
that kind of happened in the last one where like our last project where I did hand off some pieces where it's like so for context for between me and Andrew, like we had gone through a design sprint with the client, and so we kind of went through this whole exercise of identifying what the core problem, like the very large business core problem, and solution, or not solution, but like what we were ultimately trying to solve, and like who our core customers were, all those kinds of things. And so we landed on this like basic solution of like, okay, we know the general direction that we want to move forward. And so now it's like, okay, let's just say it's a client portal or something, right? Like some portal on a web app that we want to build out. We had already determined that. So now it's kind of like, okay, what features matter? Like, what is the actual capabilities that matter for specifically MVP conversations? And I think in those kinds of contexts where you're in a situation where you have to try to like build this, like go from 0 to 1, you're building an actual product from scratch. Like, I really think like the way that I had handled it is I would just be like, yeah, like a user should be able to like generally do this thing. And Andrew was like, all right, I mean, like, there's like at least four different ways that I can think of how to design this thing. And we had a lot of back and forth, which is what I think my like opinion is ultimately trying to get to is like you have to have these conversations in real time with your designer and also your development team as well. Like we talk about this term like handoff, and it kind of gives off the impression that it's like um, you know the PM sits with something, then hands it over to the designer, and then the designer takes it and then hands it over to the developer. And then it's just like there's no back and forth that's happening. But like in reality, it's like you should be having a consistent conversation throughout the entire time, right? The handoff, what I mean when I say handoff is I'm just saying at this point, I've mostly figured out what I need to do. And now it's mostly on the designer to like kind of start taking it from here. But I'm still in the conversation. If something new comes up or there's like new requirements that or questions that like and constraints that need clarification, like those conversations should be happening no matter what.
Where do you note these down? Do you have it in the ticket? Like, where does this conversation happen? Because in my opinion, as a developer, sometimes it's really helpful that you can follow like a thought, an idea. So even if you start out with a blank ticket and then all the conversation happening, but when it only happened like synchronous in a meeting, important bits might be lost.
I lean on the side of over documentation for most things,
Love
and
it.
everything kind of living generally within like an epic or user story. But I also like, I don't know, my personality type is like I just want like one particular place where I would like keep things, and so I would prefer to just like I even with Andrew, I had this like one doc where I just listed out every single user story or epic that we were writing. And then I would just kind of have it listed out, categorized, split up by like what's up next, what's coming here. It's ultimately just Jira, but we were just doing it more manually. And honestly, I think it depends on the team. So if my developers wanted that and they wanted the full trail, I would provide the full trail. This gets into this whole other thing about like documentation and like what actually matters. And I think most documentation is absolute bloat, and it's like solving problems that like shouldn't need to exist, because at the end of the day, like you're just like, and this might be a little too spicy, but like I think a lot of the solutions and documentation that we have exists purely for the sake of like executive team members or like senior leadership team who like feel left out of the conversation, but it's kind of like you're not you're kind of not really supposed to be part of the conversation at that level. And so but like different people have a hard time letting that go and letting the team actually work in it. Like the user story epics, those documentations are relevant for the product manager, the designer, and for the developers. Like they're the people who are literally implementing the thing. And so like a senior executive doesn't need to go in and be like, well, I can't see the full thread of like why, or they might say like, why is there a full thread of this? It's so hard to figure out which document is necessary and like where do I go? It's just like, well, it's not for you, so like just go read something else, or like I'll write something different for you, so stop reading these documents. Like it's not for you, you know. But that's a whole other rant that I can
No,
go
I
on.
feel
So
you.
I'll
And so because your opinion was so similar, right? What do you think? I do assume that both of you felt or had the experience of not having blank or like only a few the requirements written down. What do you think? Why do people feel the urge to pack all these details and requirements into user stories?
I don't know why. I'm not a PM, but my assumption or how it can come across, I guess, to a designer is that the PM is trying to solve the problem before it's even hits design, and then it becomes the designer's just there to kind of like, the make it look pretty term gets thrown around a lot. Like it's cutting into the responsibility of the designer and not letting them explore. It's like I think a good PM creates the right sandbox for the designer to explore solutions. And then there's like, as we've kind of been talking about, like that constant back and forth collaboration of those, as bringing in the PM to say, hey, here's like 3 ways we could approach this. Let's talk through like what's the best path here, um, and then like move forward from that. But Danny, what would you say?
I mean, I don't know what, first of all, I don't know what you mean by, designers doing more than just changing colors and shapes of icons and things.
There's a bunch of
I thought that's what,
rectangles. Yeah.
yeah, it's just a bunch of rectangles. Everything is technically a rectangle. No, but I think, I think it honestly comes down to like product manager. Again, I don't know 100% because I don't know everybody in the world, but like what I've seen is a lot of times PM pack way too much detail into their user stories or their epics, mostly because of external pressure. It's like usually because there's some executive or somebody somewhere in their org who's given them feedback and said like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, what does this mean? Like, why is this epic so vague? Why is this like thing? Like, but what about this edge case? Like, what about this thing? Like, what about this possibility? Or like sales will start reading user stories and they'll be like, oh, but like I have a customer or a prospect that like wants to buy this product, but like their main stipulation is like they want this capability, but with this like added additional feature. And so like, can we have that? And so PMs start to feel the need to kind of like add so many stipulations to their user stories, being like, it solved for this, but it doesn't solve for this and this and this. But we're aware of the fact that like there's customers out there who want this and this and like it just becomes this laundry list of trying to like cover their own ass for everything, right? Like making sure that like whoever is reading the document has nothing to say back to them because at the end of the day they want to save time of, I don't want to have to slack 15 different people to explain why my user story or my epic doesn't fit their specific use case. That's usually why I think it ends up being that way, where it just ends up being too much detail, and too much bloat. There's also the other case where I think PMs feel, probably honestly, like what Andrew was saying, too much ownership over what they think the solution should be. And so they kind of feel like, I have this great idea. They forget that, like, their role in this product triad, whatever we want to call it, um, is not to figure out how to build this solution. It's ultimately to figure out what the core problem is and to identify like why it's a problem, and why it's a problem that they have to solve right now. That's it. Like that's the constraints that you provide for development and design, and everything else goes back to my original opinion, which is like your opinion as a PM doesn't matter. Like it, it's like cool story. You want it to be a green button, but like cool, that's it, right? Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. And a lot of people are very smart, and so like of course there's going to be some clear options where it's like yeah, like we want them to be able to like backspace and like whatever, but like generally speaking, just leave it to the designers and developers. Like this is literally their job. You are not a designer, you are not a developer, you don't fully understand most of these things. Some people, I tend to find that like former developer, former designer PMs have a harder time letting that go because they're usually like, I know how to code, I know how to design, I'm going to build what I think is the best thing. But it's like you're really boxing out your designer. You might think you're a better designer than them. Again, cool story, but like you are not the designer. If you want to be the sole designer of your product, get rid of your designer then. But you don't have the say in that because like you don't manage anybody, and product managers should not have authority to do that. So like at the end of the day, it's like you're probably a really good designer, but you're being a terrible PM. So like be a better PM. That's usually my take. And that's why I think people tend to like bloat their user stories and epics too
I
much.
love that. Yeah, I agree heavily. I mean, of course, everyone can design. That's not a question, right? I mean, just kidding, Andrew. um,
Just colors and shapes.
shit. Um, what can we do so to educate PMs? Because it's, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's more like, yeah, a problem with PMs not doing their job. Like maybe just like having more demos to reduce the risk, or the pressure from higher up, maybe that the PM feel, and that should, or that could be, the designer developer can help with that, right? Saying, hey, I have this, can we just like meet, new column, I don't know, backlog, let them fill in all the backlog with tickets.
I don't think it's just a PM side. Like I think really this all comes down to collaboration and trust, I think, between the PM and the designer. So a lot of that's on the designer too, to communicate what they want to see in user stories. Like um, some designers might want that extra context. They might want to see the PM's opinion in there. And then they might be totally okay with like changing that or adjusting it. But some designers like to work off of like a starting point or like some frame of reference. So if that's what the designer wants, then that's great. But that needs to be communicated, and there needs to be trust between the two that the designer is going to deliver work that matches the needs and the user story, and will take it, to a better place than what the PM prescribed in the design. And this is why we don't use blue, we use red or whatever. But yeah, I think collaboration and trust is critical in that relationship.
Yeah. I actually kind of cheated on this because I asked a few of my designer friends from other companies. Like I have just like a few group chats, and I was like, "Hey, this is gonna be my opinion. Like, what are your thoughts?" And I actually got differing opinions. I got some designers who were very much like, yeah, like it was actually interesting some of their responses because they were like, "Yeah, PM shouldn't give us, too much detail. There should be a lot of ambiguity." But then at the same time, but they were like, "But also, I like it when they give us like." Very prescribed things because it protects designers. Where like we get to then use that as collateral against PMs. If we don't think the PM is good, that we can blame the PM and say like the PM gave us too much constraints and so that's what they wanted. So we designed the thing that they wanted, and that's why you know it's not working out well. Other designers I've heard they've been very much like I actually like it when the PM gives me like a little bit more prescriptive concepts because then it helps them kind of hone in on their design process and their kind of creative process. Like Andrew obviously is very comfortable with ambiguity, so it's like easy for me to just like throw a bunch of stuff and he'll like self regulate a lot of that, and that's comes with trust between us as well, and a lot of collaboration. And it's not like he's just sitting in a ivory white tower, just kind of spinning his wheels by himself. Like he's also kind of throwing ideas at me, like we're having conversations. But yeah, some designers might not feel comfortable with that, and so um, I do agree. I think it is kind of it depends on the designer. It is also ownership of the designer. I don't know how to solve the PM problem, honestly. Like I would probably say vast majority of PMs out there aren't struggling with this because, we often more so work with companies who either have a hard time doing this or it's like, we just happen to, it's easier as a third party to kind of notice these things. But like for the most part, like, at a lot of different orgs, you see like, they're pretty self-sufficient and they know how to do this. And, this is probably not particularly radical news or anything like that. Um, I don't know how to solve it for the PMs though, like, because it's easy for us to sit here and talk about how like, executives should just kind of back off. But we're just kind of preaching to the choir at this point. Um, and so that's the part that I have a hard time with is like, for whatever reason, there seems to just be this consistent like pattern where executives feel so intertwined into, or the need to be so intertwined into like the actual solution of like what's going on. And I don't really know how to solve for that. I don't know why. Maybe that's just a product of like what it takes to become an executive. Okay, I don't know why the same types of personalities seem to be in those kinds of positions a lot of times. Um, but it's like kind of wild to see like how often I see this pattern, and I'm like, is this just like a thing? Like, is this just a people thing? Like, I don't know what the solution is there, but
I have a thought. I think what could help is structure. So if you have user stories that follow a clear structure, and you just fill out the structure, like the pre-filled fields, for example, maybe that helps.
but who determines what the pre-filled structure? This is where
Well, you
I've had so many
at the very
discussions.
beginning, right? I mean, at the very beginning, you come together. You should come together. You have you discuss the project, and then these are rules, so to say, or guidelines that this is how we work. I mean, we do have GitHub templates. We use them for so many things, right?
I do think like transparency is helpful. I think the document Danny was talking about earlier, where he listed out all the epics that we're working on and kind of the status of those. I think that's super helpful, both for communicating with executives and for the designers too. Half of our job title is product designers, so we also are thinking about the product experience. And half the time when I'm working on a design, I come up with like some idea of like, oh, we need to make sure we're doing this. And it's helpful to have that documentation to go back and look at that Danny's created to say, okay, yeah, we are planning to solve for this, or we aren't, and this is why. But that kind of documentation of reference is really helpful, at least for me. And I would assume it's also helpful from like the other direction as well, like the top down.
And I think proactive communication, right? Like proactive,
Yeah.
like saying,
Mhm.
okay, this is what I have, this is what I'm working on, this is I can show you. I mean, this is sometimes it's a bit, I wouldn't say easier, but well, maybe it is easier for designers because they can show something but quite often it just might be a bit trickier for a backend developer to say, okay, this is what I implemented. Here, look like that, and
It's a new
yeah,
column.
new column, yeah, yeah. But so I do. This reduces the fear of, oh, we missed something, and just like continuously communication, proactive showing what we are, what's the state of it, and also reminding everyone that's the goal of it. If it's an MVP, it's an MVP. It's nothing else, right? It's the MVP.
Oh,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's a whole other opinionated conversation. Goodness. The amount of times that we've had to we like all sit down after a design sprint or some sort of thing and we're like, all right, cool, like this is what we define the MVP to be. This is minimum viable product, right? Literally the minimum. And then people are like literally weeks later somehow they're just like, but and you're like, but nothing. Like we agreed on this. You were there. You said yes. You gave a thumbs up, like I don't know what's so confusing about this. Like it's kind of common sense, and it's gonna suck. But if you keep adding more stuff to this, it's just gonna take longer to verify whether this thing is actually as good as we thought it might be, or if it's like, we might need to take a different direction. And it's better to find out in, X number of weeks rather than taking 6 months to build something and then realizing like, oh my gosh, we added so many features that nobody cares about because we made way too many assumptions that weren't called out in the beginning and we just kind of started adding things along the way. But anyway, that's, people's attention spans are too short. Yeah. There's so many good tools for that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can very easily just be like, oh, you know, that's a cool feature, but like, what do you want to take out to make room for that? And like those kinds of harder questions that you start pushing back on, it's easy to say all this stuff too, though. Like it depends on the relationship dynamics. It depends on kind of the company dynamics too. Some executives just have final say, and some PMs just have to be okay with that. Some company like product designers and developers have to be okay with that. If an executive just says, "Do it because I said so," fine. Like, but you also have to own the decision. Like if you're going to be the one responsible for that call, you just have to take ownership over it, and that's fine too. But
Yeah.
that's usually missed.
I think it's important that developers, designers, and PMs work together and not against each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things that can be easily forgotten. So you have the same goal, right? So how do you reach the goal, the most straightforward without, writing lengths of description about something that might not be important at this
Yeah.
point? Maybe it will be important after the MVP, but not now. Time is up, folks. We
Yeah.
talked for nearly half an hour. It was amazing. When I read your opinions, I really laughed so hard because it's just like, well, that's gonna be interesting. It's really fun. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Did we miss something? Do you want to say final words for this episode?
No, feeling pretty good.
Be nice to your PM.
Be nice to your designers. Oh my gosh.
Love it. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Have a lovely day and see you next time. Bye bye.